Hello everyone. Before we begin, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is right now. That's how YouTube keeps sending you more chilling stories like this. And now, let the night begin with Story 1. The Guest in Room 237. The sound of my own scream woke me up. I was standing in the hallway of the Grandview Hotel at 3:15 a.m., barefoot and shaking, holding a key card that wasn't mine. Room 237 was directly in front of me and the door was wide open. I don't remember leaving my room. I don't remember walking up the stairs. But I'll never forget what I saw inside that room, or what was waiting for me in the darkness, rocking slowly in a chair that faced the door, as if it had been expecting me all along. Let me back up. I checked into the Grandview Hotel on a Tuesday afternoon in October. It was one of those old downtown hotels that had been renovated just enough to stay in business. Vintage charm mixed with modern amenities, the kind of place that hosts regional sales conferences and small weddings. I was there for work, a 3-day pharmaceutical conference that I'd been dreading for weeks. The company had booked a block of rooms and I'd gotten stuck on the 4th floor, which was fine by me. I just wanted a decent bed and a quiet room where I could decompress after 8 hours of PowerPoint presentations and forced networking. The woman at the front desk was pleasant enough, mid-50s with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She handed me my key card and gave me the standard speech about breakfast hours and the fitness center. I remember she had a small nameplate that said Diane, and she smiled when she told me to enjoy my stay. Everything felt perfectly normal. My room was 428, clean, generic, with that particular smell that all hotel rooms have, like industrial detergent and recycled air. I dropped my suitcase on the luggage rack, kicked off my shoes, and stretched out on the bed to check my emails. The mattress was actually pretty comfortable, better than I'd expected. I ordered room service around 7, watched half of a movie I'd seen before, and was asleep by 10:30. I'm not usually an early sleeper, but the drive had worn me out more than I'd realized. I woke up at 2:47 a.m. I know the exact time because I looked at my phone, annoyed that something had pulled me out of a deep sleep. That's when I heard it, a rhythmic creaking sound coming from directly above me, from what I assumed was room 528. It was steady and deliberate, like someone rocking in a chair or shifting their weight on an old bed frame. Creak, pause, creak, over and over. I tried to ignore it, pulled the pillow over my head, but the sound was too persistent, too regular to fade into background noise. After about 10 minutes, the creaking stopped, and I felt a wave of relief. Then the footsteps started. Back and forth, pacing across the ceiling above me. Not frantic or rushed, just constant. Someone was walking from one end of the room to the other, over and over, like they were measuring the space or couldn't settle down. I waited for it to stop, assuming whoever it was would eventually get tired or remember that other people were trying to sleep. But it didn't stop. It went on for over an hour. By 4 a.m., I was furious and exhausted. I called the front desk and a different voice answered, younger, male, a night auditor probably. I told him about the noise, tried to keep my voice level and reasonable. There was a long pause. Room 528, you said? I'm in 428, so yeah, whoever's above me. They've been pacing for 2 hours straight. Another pause. I could hear him typing on a keyboard. Sir, I'm showing that room 528 is vacant, has been for about 3 weeks. I sat up straighter in bed. That's impossible. I can hear them right now. I understand, but according to our system, there's nobody checked into that room. Maybe the sound is coming from somewhere else? Old buildings? The acoustics can be strange. I looked up at the ceiling. The footsteps were still going, steady and methodical. I know what I'm hearing, I said. Can you send someone up to check? Of course, sir. Give me just a few minutes. I waited, phone in my hand, listening. The footsteps continued for another 10 minutes, then suddenly stopped. The silence was almost worse, heavy and expectant, like the moment before someone knocks on your door. I heard the elevator ding down the hall, heard someone walking past my room, then nothing. No voices, no knocking on the door above me, nothing. I called the front desk again. Did someone check room 528? Yes, sir. Our maintenance supervisor just confirmed. The room is empty and locked. There's no one inside. That doesn't make any sense. I apologize for the disturbance, Mr. Garrett. If you hear anything else, please don't hesitate to call. He sounded like he wanted to get off the phone. I didn't blame him. I sounded like the kind of guest who complains about everything. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening for any sound. Nothing. Complete silence. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was up there while standing perfectly still, listening for me the same way I was listening for them. The next morning, exhausted and jittery from too much coffee, I went through the motions at the conference. During the lunch break, I went back to my room to splash water on my face and maybe try to nap. That's when I saw it. A key card lying on the carpet just inside my door. Someone had slipped it underneath while I was gone. I picked it up slowly, like it might burn me. It looked identical to my own room key, same white plastic, same Grandview Hotel logo. But when I looked at the room number printed in small letters along the magnetic strip, my stomach dropped. Room 237, not 528. 237. I stood there for a long time holding that key card, trying to make sense of it. Room 237 would be on the second floor, directly below me, not above. But someone had left this for me. Someone wanted me to have access to that room. I told myself to throw it away, to go back to the conference and forget about it. But I couldn't. The rational part of my brain kept trying to explain it. Maybe housekeeping dropped it by mistake. Maybe it was meant for another guest. Maybe it was just a deactivated card someone had left behind. But none of those explanations felt right. That night, I heard the creaking again. Same time, 2:47 a.m. exactly. Same rhythm, same persistence. And then the footsteps, pacing back and forth for hours. I didn't call the front desk this time. I lay there in the dark, gripping my phone, waiting for it to stop. Around 3:15, I got out of bed. I don't know why. I wasn't thinking clearly, running on maybe 4 hours of sleep over 2 days, my mind fuzzy and strange. I found the key card on the desk where I'd left it. I picked it up and walked out into the hallway in my bare feet and t-shirt, not even bothering to put on shoes. The hotel was completely silent. The hallway lights were dimmed for the night, casting everything in a pale yellow glow. I walked to the stairwell and went down 2 floors. My hands were shaking. I kept thinking I should turn back, go to bed, deal with this in the morning when things would make sense again. But my feet kept moving. Room 237 was at the end of the hall, tucked into a corner away from the elevator. I stood in front of the door for a long time, the key card clutched in my hand. There was no light coming from under the door, no sound from inside. The little light above the lock glowed red, locked and vacant. I raised the key card to the sensor. That's when I woke up. I was standing in the hallway exactly where I just described, but I had no memory of the walk down. It felt like I'd blinked and suddenly found myself there, disoriented and terrified. The key card was in my hand, and room 237's door was open just a few inches, enough to see darkness inside. I heard the creaking. It was coming from inside the room, that same rhythmic sound I'd been hearing above me for 2 nights. Creak, pause, creak, pause, and underneath it, barely audible, a wet, raspy breathing. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I was frozen, staring at that gap in the doorway, my mind unable to process what was happening. The creaking stopped, the breathing got louder, And then I saw movement in the darkness, something shifting, rising from a sitting position. A chair, I realized. Someone had been sitting in a rocking chair just inside the room, facing the door. Facing me. I ran. I don't remember getting back to my room, don't remember locking the door or jamming the desk chair under the handle. I sat on the bed with all the lights on until dawn, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. At 6 a.m. I checked out. I told Diane at the front desk that I had a family emergency, needed to leave early. She was kind and understanding, didn't ask questions. As I was signing the checkout receipt, I asked her, trying to sound casual, if there was anything unusual about room 237. Her expression changed, not dramatically, just a small tightening around her eyes. Why do you ask? Just curious, I thought I heard something about it. She looked at me for a long moment, then leaned in slightly. We don't rent that room anymore, she said quietly. Haven't for almost a year. There was an incident. A guest stayed too long, refused to leave. When maintenance finally got inside, they found her still sitting in the rocking chair she'd brought from home, just sitting there in the dark. She'd been dead for 5 days. My hands went numb. The family claimed she'd been complaining about noises, Diane continued, said someone was walking around above her room every night. But the room above 237 is a storage area. Nobody goes up there. I left without another word. I've tried to rationalize what happened. Stress, exhaustion, maybe I was sleepwalking. Maybe the key card was just a coincidence, and my exhausted brain built a story around it. But I can't explain how I knew room 237 had a rocking chair inside before Diane told me. I can't explain the footsteps I heard or why they were coming from above my room when the geography doesn't make sense. Last week I got a notification from the Grandview Hotel. A confirmation email for a reservation I didn't make, dated for next month. Room 428, same room, 3 nights. I've tried to cancel it 4 times. The reservation won't delete. And every night at 2:47 a.m. I wake up to the sound of creaking like someone rocking in a chair, even though I'm in my own apartment now, miles away from that hotel. Sometimes I hear footsteps above me even though I live on the top floor. Story 2, the night audit. I was standing at the front desk watching myself check into room 14 on the security monitor when I felt a hand touch my shoulder from behind. I spun around and found the lobby empty, but on the screen, the figure that looked exactly like me turned and smiled directly at the camera as if it knew I was watching. That's when I heard the bell on the counter ring, sharp and insistent, and saw my own face staring at me through the office window. It mouthed 2 words, "Your shift." It started 3 weeks earlier, mid-January, when I took the graveyard shift at the Crossroads Motor Lodge off Highway 52. I was between semesters at community college, needed money for tuition, and the hours worked perfectly with my class schedule, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. 4 nights a week. The pay was decent for what amounted to mostly sitting alone in a small office doing paperwork and watching old movies on my laptop. The Crossroads was exactly what you'd picture, a 2-story horseshoe of rooms wrapped around a parking lot, the kind of place where long-haul truckers catch a few hours of sleep and families on tight budgets break up road trips. Not fancy, but clean enough. The owner, a tired-looking woman named Lorraine, gave me a quick tour on my first night. "It's straightforward," she said, showing me the computer system and the keys hanging on hooks behind the desk. "Most nights you won't see anyone after midnight. Process the audit reports, answer the phone if it rings, handle any late check-ins. Easy money." She walked me through the property, showing me where the ice machines were, how to reset the breakers if someone overloaded an outlet, basic maintenance stuff. When we got to the far end of the ground floor, she paused in front of room 14. "This one's off limits," she said. "Under renovation. Don't rent it out, don't go in, don't worry about it. The door looked fine to me. Same faded teal paint as all the others, no construction signs or equipment visible. But I nodded. Every place has a room like that, right? Something broken or being upgraded, not worth mentioning to every employee. The first 2 weeks were exactly as boring as Lorraine promised. I'd get maybe 1 or 2 check-ins per night, usually between 11 and 1 a.m. The rest of the time I'd study, watch Netflix, or walk the property to stay awake. The Crossroads had 16 rooms total, and occupancy rarely went above 60% during the week. Room 14 stayed dark and locked. I noticed it though. Hard not to. It was positioned right in the middle of the ground floor, visible from the office window. Sometimes during my walks around the property, I'd find myself pausing in front of it, wondering what renovations required a room to be closed for months. The door was always locked, the curtains always drawn. No sounds, no lights, nothing. On my 15th night, something changed. I was processing the night audit around 3 a.m., basically just running reports and balancing the day's transactions, when I noticed an anomaly in the system. Room 14 showed as occupied. I stared at the screen, confused. The reservation had a check-in time of 11:47 p.m. that same night, about 3 hours earlier. But I'd been at the desk the entire shift. Nobody had checked in. I would have remembered. There was no credit card on file, no ID scan, no email confirmation. Just a name in the guest field, Kyle Brennan. That's my name. I felt a chill run down my spine. Some kind of system glitch, obviously. Maybe I'd accidentally clicked something while I was tired, created a phantom reservation. I tried to delete it, but the system wouldn't let me. It kept giving me an error message that said the guest was currently in the room and couldn't be checked out. I called Lorraine. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. I tried again, then decided it could wait until morning. I'd just leave a note explaining the computer error and let her fix it when she came in. I went back to my audit work, trying to ignore the uncomfortable feeling settling in my chest. Around 3:30, I took a break and walked to the vending machine near the office to grab a Coke. That's when I saw someone walk past the office window from left to right, moving from the direction of room 14 toward the parking lot. I only caught a glimpse, just a figure in a dark hooded sweatshirt moving through the orange glow of the parking lot lights. But something about the way they moved made me stop cold. They walked exactly like me. Same gait, same slight hunch of the shoulders, same rhythm. I rushed back into the office and pulled up the security feed. The Crossroads had 4 cameras, one covering the parking lot, one on the office entrance, one on the back alley, and one on the second floor walkway. I rewound the parking lot feed to 3:30. There. The figure walked past the office window at exactly 3:33 a.m., moving with that familiar gait. They were wearing my gray hooded sweatshirt, the Northwestern one my sister gave me for Christmas. I was wearing a Northwestern sweatshirt right now. I looked down at myself to confirm, yes. Gray hoodie with the purple logo. The figure on the screen paused in the parking lot, standing under one of the orange lights. They turned slowly toward the camera, and even though the image was grainy and the face was shadowed by the hood, I could see enough. It was my face, not similar, not kind of like me. My exact face. Same narrow chin, same slightly crooked nose from when I broke it playing basketball in 8th grade, same everything. I stumbled backward from the monitor, my chair hitting the wall behind me. My heart was slamming against my ribs. This wasn't possible. I was standing in the office. I'd been here all night. Nobody had checked in. Nobody had walked past the window. I looked at the monitor again. The figure was gone. I pulled up all 4 camera feeds and went back through the entire night's footage, hands shaking so badly I could barely work the mouse. At 11:47 p.m., The exact check-in time listed in the system. The parking lot camera showed a car pulling in. A dark sedan, no plates visible. Someone got out, walked to the office, and disappeared from the camera's view as they approached the door. I switched to the office entrance camera. Nothing. No one came to the door at 11:47. But when I looked back at the parking lot feed, I could see the figure walking from the office toward room 14, keycard in hand. They moved in and out of the camera's range, and then I watched them unlock room 14 and go inside. The timestamp said 11:51 p.m. I'd been sitting at that desk at 11:51 p.m. I would have seen anyone approach. I would have heard the door chime. I sat there for a long time, trying to breathe normally, trying to think. System glitch. Had to be. Some kind of video loop or corrupted footage combined with a database error. Technology messes up. It happens. But that didn't explain what I'd just seen walk past the window. That happened in real time. I forced myself to stay in the office until my shift ended at 7 a.m. I kept all the lights on, kept checking the cameras every 5 minutes. Room 14 stayed dark. The parking lot stayed empty. Nothing else happened. When Lorraine came in to take over the morning shift, I tried to explain what I'd seen. I showed her the reservation in the system, showed her the camera footage. She watched it with an expression I couldn't read. Not quite worried, not quite surprised. "Kyle," she said finally, "that room has been locked for 8 months. I'm the only one with a key. You probably just saw someone walking through the lot, and your tired brain made connections that aren't there. As for the computer thing, I'll call tech support. Don't worry about it." But she looked worried. I went home and slept until 3 in the afternoon, the kind of heavy, dreamless sleep that comes from exhaustion. When I woke up, I had 6 missed calls from the Crossroads main number. I called back and Lorraine answered on the first ring. "Don't come in tonight," she said. Her voice was tight and strange. "Take a couple nights off, paid. I need to handle some things." "What things? What happened?" "Just take the time, Kyle, please." She hung up before I could ask anything else. I should have been relieved. Free money, extra time to study. But instead, I felt a crawling anxiety that I couldn't explain. I spent the evening trying to distract myself with homework, but I couldn't focus. Around 11 p.m., almost out of habit, I found myself getting dressed and grabbing my keys. I told myself I was just going to drive past the Crossroads just to see if everything looked normal. But when I got there, I parked across the street in a closed gas station lot and watched. The office lights were on. Through the window, I could see someone sitting at the desk. They were wearing a gray Northwestern hoodie. I got out of my car slowly, my legs unsteady. I crossed the empty highway and walked closer to the office window, staying in the shadows. The figure at the desk had their back to me, but I could see them working on the computer, their posture identical to how I always sat during the quiet hours. Slightly hunched, one hand on the mouse, one hand holding a pen that they tapped absently against the desk. I walked up to the window and looked inside. The figure at the desk was me. Not someone who looked like me, not a trick of the light. Me. Same face, same build, same nervous habit of tapping the pen. I watched myself work for maybe 30 seconds, unable to process what I was seeing, unable to move or think or breathe. Then the figure, me, looked up at the security monitor. Their expression changed. They leaned closer to the screen, staring at something. Then slowly, very slowly, they turned in the chair and looked directly at me through the window. We made eye contact. The thing wearing my face smiled. I ran. I don't remember getting back to my car, don't remember driving home. I just remember that smile, too wide, too knowing, like it had been waiting for me to show up. I called Lorraine 20 times that night. She never picked up. I called the police and tried to file a report, but what was I supposed to say? Someone who looks like me is working my shift? They took a statement, but I could tell they thought I was on something. The next morning, I got a notification from the Crossroads payroll system. My employment had been terminated, effective immediately. Reason: voluntary resignation. I never resigned. I tried going back to the motel in daylight, tried to talk to Lorraine face to face. The office was locked. A handwritten sign in the window said, "Under new management." I looked through the window and saw someone in a northwestern hoodie sitting at the desk, working on the computer. They didn't turn around, but I knew if they did, I'd see my own face. That was 3 months ago. I've driven past the Crossroads maybe a dozen times since then, always during the day, always just to check. The office is always occupied. There's always someone at that desk, and from a distance, they always look like me. I've tried to move on, tried to tell myself it was stress or a breakdown or something I can eventually explain. But last week I got a notification from my bank. A direct deposit from the Crossroads Motor Lodge, payment for 80 hours of work. I haven't been back there since March. I still get the deposits every 2 weeks, regular as clockwork. And sometimes late at night, when I can't sleep, I pull up Google Maps and look at the street view of the Crossroads Motor Lodge. You can see the office window clearly in the satellite image. If you zoom in far enough, you can see someone sitting at the desk inside. The image is dated from last month. It's wearing my face. Story 3. The bellhop who wouldn't leave. I found him standing in my closet at 3 in the morning, perfectly still, facing the wall where he'd hung my clothes in precise intervals, every hanger exactly 2 inches apart. His old-fashioned uniform was spotless despite the smell of rot that filled the room. When I screamed, he turned around slowly, smile never wavering, and said in that same cheerful, rehearsed voice, "Is there anything else I can do to make your stay more comfortable, ma'am?" That's when I saw that his name tag, the one that said Philip in gold letters, was pinned directly into his chest, the metal backing driven through fabric and flesh like he'd worn it so long it had become part of him. I should have known something was wrong the moment I walked into the historic Grand. It was late September and I'd booked 3 nights at the hotel for a wedding. My college roommate was getting married at a vineyard about 20 minutes outside the city, and the historic Grand was the recommended accommodation for out-of-town guests. The photos online had sold me immediately. Marble lobbies, Art Deco elevators, high ceilings with original crown molding. The place had been built in 1924 and carefully restored to its original elegance, or so the website claimed. When I pulled up in my rental car around 4 in the afternoon, the entrance was impressive. Brass revolving doors, a doorman in a long coat, the whole aesthetic. I grabbed my suitcase from the trunk and headed inside, planning to check in quickly and maybe explore the downtown area before dinner. That's when he appeared. "Allow me, ma'am." I hadn't seen him approach. One moment I was maneuvering my suitcase through the revolving door. The next moment there was a man in a burgundy bellhop uniform reaching for my bag with white-gloved hands. He was maybe 60, thin, with slicked-back gray hair and a smile that showed too many teeth. "Oh, that's okay," I said. "I can manage, it's not heavy." I insist. His voice was cheerful but oddly flat, like he was reading from a script. "It's my pleasure to assist you during your stay at the historic Grand. May I take your luggage to your room?" There was something about the way he stood, too rigid, too formal, that made me uncomfortable. But I was tired from the flight, and he was already lifting my suitcase with surprising strength for someone his age. "Sure," I said. "Thank you, that's very nice." "It's my pleasure to assist you during your stay at the historic Grand," he repeated, exact same inflection. "Please proceed to check in and I'll have your luggage brought up momentarily." I watched him wheel my suitcase toward the elevator, his movements stiff and mechanical. The brass name tag on his uniform caught the light. Philip, Check-in was smooth. The woman at the front desk was friendly and efficient, and within 10 minutes I had my key card to room 512. When I asked about the bellhop who'd taken my luggage, she looked confused. Bellhop? Yeah, older gentleman in the burgundy uniform, Philip. She exchanged a glance with the other clerk. We don't have bellhop service, ma'am. Hasn't been part of our service model for, I want to say, at least 15 years. Guests manage their own luggage, or we can send maintenance up to help if needed. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. But someone just took my suitcase. He was wearing a uniform. He said he was bringing it to my room. Her expression shifted from confusion to concern. What did he look like? I described him. Gray hair, thin burgundy uniform, white gloves. As I spoke, I watched her face go carefully neutral, the kind of neutral that means someone is trying very hard not to react. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding, she said. Let me call up to your room and check. But when I got to room 512, my suitcase was already there. It was sitting on the luggage rack near the closet, positioned with mathematical precision, perfectly centered, handle aligned. I stood in the doorway for a long moment staring at it. The woman downstairs had made the call just 2 minutes ago. The elevator had taken at least a minute. There was no way anyone could have gotten my suitcase up here that fast. I stepped inside slowly and locked the door behind me. The room was beautiful. High ceilings, original hardwood floors, a 4-poster bed with crisp white linens. Everything looked normal. But when I approached my suitcase to start unpacking, I froze. It was open. I hadn't locked it, but I distinctly remembered zipping it closed. Now the main compartment was open, and I could see my clothes inside, but they weren't how I'd packed them. Everything had been removed, carefully refolded, and placed back in perfect stacks. My toiletry bag had been unzipped and reorganized, bottles arranged by height. Even my shoes had been taken out and wiped clean before being placed back. Someone had gone through everything I owned. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and called the front desk. I tried to keep my voice calm, but I could hear the edge of panic creeping in. Someone went through my luggage. I'm sorry, ma'am. Could you repeat that? My suitcase. Someone opened it and went through all my things, the bellhop, or whoever he was. He didn't just deliver it, he unpacked everything and... Ma'am, I assure you, no one from our staff would access a guest's personal belongings. Are you sure you didn't perhaps forget that you'd opened it? I didn't forget. I was opening drawers as I spoke, checking the closet. My clothes are in the dresser. Someone put them away. Someone was in this room. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, I'll send security up to speak with you. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the closet where my dresses now hung in a neat row, and waited. It took security almost 15 minutes to arrive. A middle-aged man in a blazer with a radio clipped to his belt. He was polite but clearly skeptical as he looked through the room, checking the windows in the bathroom. Door was locked when you arrived? He asked. Yes. And you're certain you didn't unpack earlier and forget? I'm certain. He glanced at the closet, at the clothes hanging in their precise intervals. Sometimes guests at historic hotels report unusual experiences. Old buildings, lots of history. The mind can play tricks. This isn't my mind playing tricks. Someone went through my suitcase. He gave me a practiced, sympathetic smile. I'll file a report. If you notice anything missing or have any other concerns, please don't hesitate to call the desk. After he left, I checked my belongings 3 times. Nothing was missing. Everything was just rearranged, organized with an almost obsessive precision that made my skin crawl. I tried to convince myself it was housekeeping, some overeager employee who'd made a mistake. But housekeeping wouldn't have gone through my toiletries, wouldn't have refolded my underwear. That night I barely slept. Every small sound made me sit up in bed. The building settling, pipes creaking, the hum of the heating system. Around 2 a.m. I thought I heard humming coming from the hallway, an old-fashioned tune I didn't recognize. When I looked through the peephole, the hallway was empty. At 3:15 a.m. I woke up to a sound that made my blood go cold. Someone was in my room. I could hear them moving around in the darkness near the closet, slow and deliberate. The rustle of fabric, the soft squeak of hangers being adjusted. I lay perfectly still, too terrified to move, watching the shadows shift in the dim light coming from under the bathroom door. I heard humming, that same old tune. After what felt like hours but was probably only a minute, I forced myself to move. I sat up fast and reached for the bedside lamp, flooding the room with light. The closet door was open. My clothes were hanging exactly as they had been, but now there were other things mixed in. Old-fashioned uniforms, burgundy jackets with tarnished brass buttons, white shirts with yellowed collars. They smelled like mothballs and something else, something organic and wrong. I ran to the door, fumbled with the locks, and threw it open. The hallway was empty. But as I stood there in the doorway, breathing hard, I noticed something. Wet footprints on the carpet leading from my room toward the elevator. Not recent footprints. These looked old. The stains set deep into the fiber, like someone had walked this path so many times the moisture had permanently darkened the floor. I followed them. They led to the elevator, then stopped. I pressed the button and waited, watching the brass arrow above the doors climb slowly from the ground floor. When the doors opened, the car was empty, but there was a smell, mothballs and rot and something chemical like formaldehyde. On the brass wall panel, someone had drawn a symbol in what looked like tarnish or old fingerprints. Room 512. I didn't go back to my room. I went straight to the front desk. A different clerk now, someone I hadn't seen before, and demanded to speak to a manager. It took 3 tries before they finally sent someone, a tired-looking woman in her 40s who introduced herself as the night manager. I told her everything. The bellhop, the unpacked luggage, the sounds in my room, the uniforms in my closet. She listened with an expression that slowly shifted from professional concern to something else. Recognition, maybe, or resignation. "I need you to come with me," she said finally. She led me to an office behind the front desk and pulled out an old leather-bound book, a ledger of some kind filled with handwritten entries. She flipped through pages until she found what she was looking for, then turned the book toward me. It was a staff roster from 1956. Halfway down the page, written in faded ink, Philip Crane, bellhop, employed 1924-1956. "He worked here for 32 years, the manager said quietly. "Lived in the hotel, actually. There used to be staff quarters on the 6th floor. He was obsessive about his job, took enormous pride in it. When they discontinued the bellhop position in '56, part of a modernization effort, he refused to leave. They found him 3 weeks later in one of the storage rooms. He'd hung himself with his uniform belt." I felt sick. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because most guests never experience anything. And the ones who do, we try to handle it discreetly. We can move you to another room, of course. We can..." "I'm leaving," I said, "right now." "Of course, we'll refund your stay." I went back up to room 512 one last time just to grab my things. The closet door was closed now. I opened it slowly, half expecting to see those uniforms again, but it was just my clothes hanging in their perfect intervals. I started pulling things off hangers, shoving them into my suitcase without folding them, just wanting to get out as fast as possible. That's when I heard the bathroom door creak open behind me. I turned around slowly. Philip was standing in the bathroom doorway, that same rigid posture, that same too-wide smile. His uniform looked fresh in the dim light, but up close I could see the decay underneath, skin gray and sunken, eyes filmed over, the brass name tag embedded deep in his chest where the flesh had rotted around it. "Is there anything else I can do to make your stay more comfortable, ma'am?" His voice was cheerful, mechanical, exactly like before. I grabbed my suitcase and ran. I made it to my car, drove to a different hotel, and spent the rest of the weekend sleeping with the lights on. The wedding was beautiful, though I barely remember it. I kept thinking about Philip, about that smile, about the way he'd hung my clothes with such obsessive care. The historic Grand refunded my money and sent a formal apology. I never responded, but here's the thing that keeps me awake sometimes. 2 weeks after I got home, I was unpacking the last of my travel things and I found something in the inner pocket of my suitcase. Something that definitely wasn't there when I packed. A small brass button from a bellhop's uniform, carefully wrapped in a piece of yellowed paper. Written on the paper in perfect old-fashioned script, "It was my pleasure to assist you during your stay." I threw it away immediately, took the trash out that same night, but sometimes late at night I still hear that humming, that old-fashioned tune I don't recognize. And when I check my closet in the morning, my clothes are hanging in perfect intervals, every hanger exactly 2 inches apart. Story 4: What Lives in the Walls. The breathing matched mine. When I inhaled, it inhaled. When I held my breath, it went silent. I was standing in the bathroom with my ear pressed against the wall, my own heartbeat thundering in my chest, and I could feel something on the other side pressing back, listening to me the same way I was listening to it. That's when the wallpaper started to bulge outward, like something was pushing against it from inside, and I saw the outline of fingers spreading across the surface, testing the barrier, trying to find a way through. I pulled into the parking lot of the roadside inn around 9 p.m. on a Wednesday, exhausted from 11 straight hours of driving. I was relocating from Oregon to North Carolina for a new job, making the cross-country trip solo with everything I owned crammed into my Honda Civic. The plan was to break the drive into 4 days, and this was night 2, somewhere in the middle of Wyoming on Interstate 40, surrounded by nothing but darkness and scattered truck stops. The roadside inn wasn't much to look at, a single-story strip of connected rooms painted a faded turquoise, with a flickering neon sign that said vacancy in hot pink letters. But it was late, I was beyond tired, and the next town was another 60 miles. Good enough. The clerk at the front desk was a woman in her 70s who barely looked up from her crossword puzzle when I came in. I paid cash for one night, and she handed me a physical key attached to a plastic diamond-shaped tag. "Room 17. Checkout's at 10, she said. "Continental breakfast ends at 9. Coffee's in the lobby if you need it." The room smelled like decades of cigarette smoke imperfectly masked by chemical air freshener, but it was clean enough. Outdated, dark wood paneling on the walls, a floral bedspread that probably hadn't been replaced since the 90s, a boxy television with a remote chained to the nightstand. But the bed looked comfortable, and that was all I cared about. I took a quick shower, brushed my teeth, and collapsed into bed around 10:30. I was asleep within minutes. I woke up to a scratching sound. It was faint at first, easy to dismiss as part of a dream. But as I surfaced into consciousness, the sound became clearer. Something moving behind the wall above the headboard. Scratching, but not frantic. Deliberate and rhythmic, like something was dragging claws across wood in slow, measured strokes. I sat up and checked my phone. 12:47 a.m. I listened, trying to pinpoint the exact location. It seemed to be coming from directly behind the headboard, maybe a foot above the mattress. Probably a mouse or a squirrel that had gotten into the walls. Old building, rural location. Made sense. I put in my earbuds, played some white noise, and tried to go back to sleep. The scratching got louder. Even with the white noise, I could hear it, not just the scratching now, but movement. Something shuffling and shifting inside the walls like it was repositioning itself. Then the scratching would start again, closer to where I was lying. I took out the earbuds and got up, pressing my ear against the wall above the headboard. The sound was definitely coming from inside the wall cavity, but it didn't sound like a small animal anymore. The scratching was too deliberate, too purposeful, and underneath it I could hear something else, breathing. Slow, wet, raspy breathing, like someone with a chest infection struggling to pull in air. I stepped back from the wall, my skin prickling. This wasn't a mouse. Whatever was in there was bigger. I turned on all the lights, the overhead, the bathroom light, the lamp on the desk, and stood in the middle of the room trying to think rationally. Old building, probably terrible insulation, sound could be carrying from another room or from outside. The breathing I heard could have been air moving through pipes or vents. Logical explanations. I walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. The parking lot was nearly empty, just my car, a truck with Idaho plates, and the clerk's old sedan near the office. Room 16 directly next to mine was dark. Room 18 on the other side was also dark. Nobody was moving around. I let the curtain fall back and turned around. The scratching had moved. It was coming from the wall next to the bathroom now at about shoulder height. I stood perfectly still, listening. Scratch, scratch, pause. Scratch, scratch, pause. Then the breathing again, louder this time, coming from the same spot as the scratching. It was following me. I felt a wave of cold terror wash over me. Whatever was in the walls wasn't randomly moving around. It had tracked my position from the bed to the window. And now it was right behind the wall I was standing near. I backed away slowly, moving toward the door. The scratching followed, traveling along the wall as I moved, keeping pace with me. When I stopped, it stopped. When I took a step, I heard it shift position on the other side. I need to get out of here. I grabbed my car keys and headed for the door, but the scratching suddenly became frantic, rapid, desperate scraping like whatever was inside was trying to break through. I froze with my hand on the doorknob. The breathing got louder, heavier. I could hear it clearly now, even from across the room. A thick gurgling sound that made me think of wet lungs and decay. I yanked the door open and stumbled outside into the cold night air, gasping like I'd been underwater. The parking lot was silent. The neon vacancy sign buzzed overhead. I stood there shaking, keys gripped so tight they bit into my palm. I should have gotten in my car and left. Driven all night to the next town, found another place to sleep, cut my losses. That's what any reasonable person would have done. But all my belongings were still in that room. My suitcase, my laptop, my phone charger, and I'd paid for the night. Plus, standing out in the cold, the fear started to feel irrational. It was just sounds, probably pipes or animals or a combination of both. I was exhausted, my nerves were shot from 2 days of driving, and my mind was making connections that weren't there. I walked back to the office. The old woman was still at the desk, still working on her crossword. "Something wrong?" she asked without looking up. "There's something in the walls of my room. Some kind of animal, I think. I can hear it scratching and moving around." She finally looked at me, her expression unreadable. "Room 17? "Yes." "It's an old building," she said. "Sometimes we get mice, they're harmless. I can give you a different room if you want." "Yes, please." She reached behind her and grabbed another key, this one marked with a plastic tag that said Room 9. "This one's at the other end. Should be quiet." I thanked her and took the key, then went back to room 17 to grab my things. I opened the door slowly, half expecting to see something inside. But the room looked exactly as I'd left it. The scratching had stopped. I quickly gathered my suitcase and my bag, checking to make sure I had everything. As I was leaving, I paused and looked at the wall above the headboard. In the cheap artificial light from the overhead fixture, I could see something I hadn't noticed before. The wallpaper was bulging slightly, a small raised section about the size of a dinner plate. And as I stared at it, I watched it shift. Just a tiny movement, like something on the other side was pressing against it and then retreating. I left without looking back. Room 9 was identical in layout, but decorated in a different color scheme. Blue instead of brown, same dated furniture. I locked the door, pushed the desk chair under the handle for extra security, and tried to settle in. It was almost 2 a.m. now, and I needed sleep. I lasted about 20 minutes before the scratching started again. This time it was coming from the wall behind the television, the one that separated my room from room 10. The same deliberate rhythmic pattern, scratch, scratch, pause, and then the breathing. That horrible, wet, raspy sound. I grabbed my phone and called the front desk. The old woman answered on the 4th ring. "It's in this room too," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Whatever's in the walls, it's in room 9 too." Silence on the other end. Then, "It's just mice, honey. Try to get some sleep." "This isn't mice. Something is following me. I can hear it breathing." "Buildings make noise," she said, her voice tired and flat. "You're overtired. You're imagining." "I'm not imagining anything. I want a refund. I'm leaving." Another pause. "Office doesn't open for refunds until 8 a.m. Then I'll come back in the morning." I hung up and started throwing my things back into my suitcase. The scratching was getting louder, more aggressive. I could hear it traveling along the wall, moving toward the bathroom. I moved away from that wall toward the door, and the sound followed me. That's when I noticed the small hole in the corner of the room where the wallpaper had peeled back, near the baseboard behind the desk. It was dark inside, but as I stared at it, I saw movement. Something shifted in the darkness, and then I saw it. An eye. Not an animal eye, too large, too aware. A human eye, wide and bloodshot, pressed close to the hole, watching me from inside the wall. I screamed and ran for the door, but it wouldn't open. The doorknob turned, but the door wouldn't budge, like something was holding it shut from the other side, or like the frame had warped. I yanked on it desperately, threw my shoulder against it, screaming for help. The breathing behind me got louder. I could hear it right next to my ear now, hot and wet, even though nothing was visible in the room with me. The smell hit me then, rot and mildew and something chemical like formaldehyde. The door finally gave way, and I burst out into the parking lot. I ran to my car, fumbled with the keys, and got inside, locking the doors. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I looked back at room 9. The curtain moved, just a flutter, and I saw a shadow pass behind the window, but I hadn't turned on the lights in that room. It should have been dark inside. I drove. I didn't stop until I saw dawn breaking over the horizon, and by then I was in Colorado, nearly 300 miles from the roadside inn. I pulled into a truck stop and sat in my car for an hour, trying to process what had happened, trying to convince myself it had been exhaustion or stress or some kind of carbon monoxide leak that made me hallucinate. But I couldn't explain the eye. I couldn't explain how the breathing had moved with me, how whatever was in those walls had tracked me from one room to another. 2 weeks later, after I'd settled into my new apartment in North Carolina, I Googled the roadside inn. I wanted to see reviews, wanted to know if anyone else had experienced what I had. The motel's website was bare bones and hadn't been updated in years. But I found an old news article from 2008, a brief mention buried in a local paper's archives. A maintenance worker had died at the roadside inn in 2007. He'd been doing repairs in the crawl space that ran behind all the ground floor rooms when part of the structure collapsed, trapping him in the narrow space between the walls. They didn't find his body for 6 days. The article didn't mention his name or which section of the motel it happened in. It didn't need to. I still think about that eye sometimes, wide and aware, watching me from inside the wall. I think about how the breathing followed me from room to room, how whatever was in there knew exactly where I was standing. I've stayed in plenty of hotels and motels since then, all across the country. But now, before I unpack, I check the walls. I look for holes in the wallpaper, bulges in the paint, any sign that something might be living in the spaces we're not supposed to see. And late at night, when the building is quiet and I'm trying to fall asleep, I press my ear against the wall and listen. Because sometimes I swear I can still hear it, that slow, wet breathing, coming from somewhere just on the other side, waiting. Story 5. The reservation I didn't make. They were showing me photos of myself that I'd never seen before. Me standing in this exact room. Me sitting on this same bed. Me looking out this window with an expression of hollow resignation I'd never worn in my life. The most recent photo was dated tomorrow. In it, I was standing in the corner of the room facing the wall, and someone had written on the back in my own handwriting, Day 127. I finally understand why I keep coming back. But I'd never been here before. I'd never made this reservation. And I had no idea what would happen when tomorrow arrived. It started when I pulled up to the Riverside Inn without a reservation, hoping they'd have a room available. I'd been driving for 3 hours after a last-minute business meeting in Portland fell through, and I was too tired to make it home to Seattle. The Riverside Inn appeared on my GPS as I was searching for nearby hotels. 3 stars, reasonable rates, available rooms, good enough. I pulled into the parking lot around 8 p.m. on a Thursday in early November. The lobby was small but clean, decorated in that generic way that all mid-tier hotels seem to share. Floral carpet, landscape paintings in gold frames, a coffee station with stacked cups in those tiny creamer containers. A young guy, maybe mid-20s, stood behind the front desk looking at a computer screen. "Hi," I said. "I don't have a reservation, but I was hoping you might have a single room available for tonight." He looked up and smiled, too quickly, like he'd been expecting me. "Of course, Mr. Patterson. We've been expecting you." I stopped halfway through pulling out my wallet. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your usual room is ready. Room 309. He was already typing something, not looking at me. "I have you down for one night, checking out tomorrow morning." "I think there's been a mistake. My name's not Patterson." He glanced at his screen, then at me, still smiling that pleasant hotel clerk smile. "I'm sorry, sir. What name should I have?" "Garrett, Jordan Garrett. But I don't have a reservation. I just walked in." His expression flickered, just for a second, confusion replacing the practiced hospitality. He looked at his screen again, scrolled, clicked something. The smile returned, but it seemed more forced now. "Ah, I see. My apologies, Mr. Garrett. System error. But yes, we do have availability. Would you like a single room?" "Yes, please." He typed for a moment, then paused. His eyes moved across the screen, reading something. When he looked up at me again, that flicker of confusion was back. "It seems our system does have a reservation under Patterson for room 309, first name Jordan." My stomach dropped. "That's my first name, but my last name is Garrett, not Patterson." "That's quite a coincidence." He wasn't smiling anymore. Let me check something." He picked up a phone and called someone, speaking in low tones I couldn't quite hear. I stood there at the counter, feeling increasingly uneasy. Finally, he hung up and turned back to me. "Mr. Garrett, I apologize for the confusion. Would you be comfortable staying in room 309? It's already prepared, and there seems to have been a reservation system error under a similar name. No charge for the inconvenience." I should have said no. Should have asked for a different room or just left and found another hotel. But I was exhausted, and the logical part of my brain said it was just a computer glitch. Someone with a similar name, a mixed-up reservation, nothing sinister. "Sure," I said. "That's fine." He handed me a key card, gave me directions to the 3rd floor, and wished me a good night. The whole interaction had taken maybe 10 minutes, but it left me feeling off balance in a way I couldn't quite name. Room 309 was at the end of the hall, last door on the right. I unlocked it and stepped inside, reaching for the light switch. The room was set up like someone had been living there, not just cleaned and prepared for a guest, actually lived in. There were personal items everywhere. A jacket hung on the back of the desk chair. Toiletries lined the bathroom sink. Shaving cream, toothbrush, deodorant, all opened and used. The closet had clothes hanging inside, button-down shirts and slacks still in dry cleaning bags. On the nightstand sat a pair of reading glasses, a phone charger, and a small framed photograph. I picked up the photograph slowly, my hands starting to shake. It was me, not someone who looked like me. Me, standing in this exact room in front of this exact window, wearing a gray button-down shirt I owned. The photo looked recent, my hair was cut the same way, my face looked the same age. But I'd never been to this hotel before. I'd never taken this photo. I set it down carefully and backed away from the nightstand. My heart was pounding now, fear mixing with complete disorientation. I checked the closet again, pulling out one of the shirts. It was my size, my style. There was even a small coffee stain near the bottom button, the same place I'd stained one of my work shirts about a month ago. I pulled out my phone and called the front desk. The same guy answered. "This is Jordan Garrett in room 309. There's someone's belongings in this room. This room isn't empty." "I'm sorry, could you clarify?" "There are clothes in the closet, toiletries in the bathroom, personal items everywhere. Someone is staying in this room. This has to be a mistake." Silence. Then, "Sir, room 309 has been vacant for 2 days. It was cleaned this morning. There shouldn't be anything in there except hotel property. I'm looking at someone's jacket right now. I'm looking at a photograph of..." I stopped. How could I explain the photograph? "Can you send someone up here, please?" "Of course, I'll send our manager up right away." I waited in the hallway, door propped open, too unsettled to stay inside. 5 minutes later, a woman in her 50s arrived, introducing herself as Rebecca, the night manager. I explained what I'd found, and she followed me into the room. She looked at the jacket, opened the closet, checked the bathroom. Her expression was carefully controlled, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "This is very unusual," she said finally. "These items aren't supposed to be here." "Whose are they?" "I don't know, but we'll get this sorted out. Let me get you set up in a different room immediately and we'll have housekeeping remove these items." "Wait, what about the photo? Have you seen this photo?" I handed it to her. She studied it for a long moment and I watched something shift in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or something worse. "Sir, I think it would be best if you took a different room." "That's me in the photo, that's my face. How is that possible if I've never been here before?" "I don't know," she said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. "Please let me get you moved to a different room. 412 is available. I'll have someone help with your bags." "I don't have bags yet. They're still in my car. I haven't unpacked because I walked into someone else's space." She nodded quickly. "Of course, room 412. No charge for your stay tonight, and again, I sincerely apologize for this confusion." I followed her out, but as we walked down the hall, I looked back at room 309. The door was still open and I could see the photograph on the nightstand where I'd left it. Except now it was facing outward, toward the door. I'd laid it face down. I was certain I'd laid it face down. Room 412 was blessedly empty, generic, clean, nothing personal or unusual. Rebecca left after apologizing 3 more times, and I locked the door behind her. Then I locked the deadbolt. Then I pushed the desk chair under the door handle. I sat on the bed and tried to think rationally. Someone was messing with me. That was the only explanation. Some kind of prank or scam, though I couldn't figure out the angle. The photograph could have been photoshopped. Someone had gotten a picture of me somehow and edited it into a hotel room setting. The clothes were a coincidence, same style and size as lots of men. But that didn't explain the reservation under Jordan Patterson. That didn't explain how the hotel had been expecting me. I barely slept. Every sound in the hallway made me sit up in bed, certain that someone was coming to my door. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps pass by my room and stop. I held my breath, listening. The footsteps moved on after a moment, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had paused right outside 412, listening for me the way I was listening for them. At 6 a.m., I gave up on sleep. I grabbed my laptop and started searching for information about the Riverside Inn. There wasn't much. Basic hotel website, some reviews on travel sites, nothing unusual. Then I tried searching Riverside Inn Jordan Patterson. The first result made my blood run cold. It was a check-in review from 4 months ago on a travel website. The reviewer had used the screen name J. Patterson 85 and given the hotel 5 stars. The review read, "Great stay as always. Room 309 is my home away from home. Staff is always welcoming. I've been coming here monthly for business and they treat me like family." I clicked on the user profile. J. Patterson 85 had posted 7 reviews total, all for the Riverside Inn, all 5 stars dating back over a year. All of them mentioned room 309. All of them referenced monthly visits. With shaking hands, I opened the photos attached to the reviews. They were all of me. Me in room 309 smiling at the camera. Me standing by the window with the river visible in the background. Me sitting at the desk with a laptop open. In every photo, I looked comfortable, at home, like I'd been staying there for years. But I'd never been to the Riverside Inn before last night. I was certain of it. I went back to the review dates. The first one was posted 13 months ago. The most recent was from 3 weeks ago. According to these reviews, I'd been staying at this hotel once a month for over a year, always in the same room, always leaving glowing reviews. I checked the most recent photos, the ones from 3 weeks ago. In them, I looked different, thinner, tired. There was something hollow in my eyes that made me look like I hadn't slept in days. And in the background of one photo, I could see something written on the hotel notepad on the desk. I zoomed in as far as the image quality would allow. The handwriting looked like mine. The note read, "Day 89. Still can't remember checking in." I closed the laptop and tried to breathe. This wasn't possible. Someone was setting me up, stalking me, I don't know. But there had to be a rational explanation. At 7 a.m., I went down to the lobby. A different person was at the desk now, an older woman who smiled pleasantly when I approached. "Can I help you?" "I need to ask about a guest, Jordan Patterson. He apparently stays here regularly in room 309. Her expression brightened. "Oh yes, Mr. Patterson, he's one of our regulars. Such a nice gentleman. He hasn't checked in yet this month, but we're expecting him soon." "What does he look like?" She seemed confused by the question. "Well, he's about your height, brown hair, usually wears business casual." "Why do you ask?" "When was the last time he stayed here?" She typed something into the computer. "Looks like he checked out 3 weeks ago, stayed for 2 nights. But according to our system, he has a reservation for tonight, actually. Room 309. My room, the reservation under Patterson for tonight. Is there a credit card on file? I can't share guest information, I'm sorry." Please, this is important. Is there a phone number, an email, anything? She hesitated, looking at me more carefully now. Sir, is everything all right? That man is me. I'm Jordan Patterson, but I'm also Jordan Garrett. And I don't know how that's possible. She stared at me for a long moment. Then very quietly she said, "Let me get the manager." Rebecca arrived within minutes, the same woman from last night. When she saw me, her expression tightened. "Mr. Garrett, I thought you'd be checking out this morning. I need to see room 309 again." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not? What's in that room?" She glanced at the desk clerk, then back to me. "Please come with me to my office." We sat in a small office behind the front desk. Rebecca closed the door and sat across from me, hands folded on the desk. "How much do you know about dissociative fugue states?" she asked. "What?" "It's a rare psychological condition where a person loses awareness of their identity and sometimes travels or wanders, living under a different name. They can create entire alternate lives without remembering their original identity." I felt cold. "You think that's what's happening to me?" "I don't know. But Mr. Patterson has been staying here monthly for over a year, always paying cash, always staying in room 309. 2 months ago, he seemed different, confused. He kept insisting he'd never been here before, even though we had records of his previous stays. He became quite agitated. We had to ask him to leave. And you think I'm him? You think I've been coming here for a year and just don't remember? I think it's a possibility you should consider. Then check my ID, check my credit cards. My name is Jordan Garrett. I live in Seattle. I work for a medical supply company. I have an entire verifiable life. Mr. Patterson also had identification and credit cards. He lived in Seattle. He worked in medical sales." The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the arms of the chair to steady myself. "Show me," I said. "Show me everything you have on Jordan Patterson." She pulled a file from her desk drawer and opened it. Inside were photocopies of a driver's license, a credit card, a business card, all with the name Jordan Patterson, all with my face. The address on the license was in Seattle, but not my address, a street I'd never lived on. "We keep copies for our records," Rebecca said quietly. "When he started behaving strangely, we wanted documentation in case there were problems." I looked through the papers with numb hands. Everything looked official, legitimate, but I knew this wasn't me. I'd never used these cards, never lived at that address. "I need to see room 309, I said. "Right now." She studied me for a long moment, then stood up. "All right, but I'm coming with you." We took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The hallway was empty, quiet except for the hum of ice machines and distant traffic. Room 309 was exactly as I'd left it last night. Door closed, do not disturb sign hanging from the handle. Rebecca unlocked it with her master key. The room looked different in daylight. The personal items were still there, the clothes, the toiletries, the photograph. But now I noticed more. A journal on the desk, leather-bound and well-used. Prescription bottles in the bathroom with my name on them, Jordan Patterson, for medications I'd never taken. A laptop sitting closed on the desk. I opened the journal. The handwriting was mine. Perfect match. The same slant and pressure I used when writing by hand. The first entry was dated 14 months ago. Day 1. Checked into the Riverside Inn for business. Nice place. Comfortable. Room 309 has a good view of the river. Think I'll ask to stay here again next time. I flipped forward, scanning entries at random. Day 22. They recognized me at check-in, starting to feel like home. Day 45. Can't remember the drive here. I must have been on autopilot, too much work stress. Day 67. Noticed something strange. There are clothes in my closet I don't remember packing. Same style I'd wear, though. Day 89. Still can't remember checking in. The staff says I arrived yesterday, but I don't remember it. Losing time? The entries became shorter, more confused. By day 100, the writing was shaky and hard to read. I don't want to be here. I keep trying to leave, but I end up back in this room. Don't remember the drive. Don't remember checking in. Why do I keep coming back? The final entry was dated 3 weeks ago, day 127. I finally understand this isn't about memory or psychology. The room knows me. It's been learning me, copying me, pulling me back. Every time I leave, a part of me stays here and it gets stronger. I see him sometimes in the mirror, the version of me that never left, that lives here now. He looks like he's waiting for something, waiting for me to finally stay. Beneath the writing, someone had drawn the same room layout over and over, obsessive, repetitive sketches covering 2 full pages. I dropped the journal like it had burned me. "We need to call the police," I said. "Something is very wrong here." Rebecca was pale, staring at the journal. "I think you should leave, Mr. Garrett. Check out now. Don't come back." "What do you know about this room?" "Nothing. I don't know anything." "You're lying." She looked at me then, and I saw fear in her eyes. "Room 309 has the highest revenue of any room in this hotel. It's occupied more than any other room, booked almost every night, sometimes back-to-back reservations. But we rarely see guests coming or going. Housekeeping never finds it occupied during the day, but it's always booked at night. We don't ask questions because it's good for business. That's impossible. I know, but that's what happens." I looked around the room one more time, at the clothes that fit me perfectly, at the photograph of me in a place I'd never been, at the journal documenting months of visits I never made. And then I saw it. On the desk, tucked under the laptop, was a printed reservation confirmation. I pulled it out. Guest name, Jordan Garrett, room 309, check-in, today's date. Check-out, tomorrow's date, tomorrow. The reservation said I was checking out tomorrow, but I'd never made this reservation. And according to the journal, once you check into room 309, checking out becomes harder than you'd think. I grabbed my phone and took photos of everything, the journal, the clothes, the reservation, all of it. Then I walked out without looking back. I drove straight to Seattle, didn't stop until I was home. I documented everything I could remember, filed a police report about identity theft and stalking, contacted a lawyer. But I knew, somewhere deep in my chest I knew, this wasn't something police reports could fix. That was 3 weeks ago. Last night I found myself packing a bag at 11 p.m. I don't remember deciding to pack. I looked down and saw clothes folded neatly in my duffel, my toiletries gathered on the bathroom counter, my laptop case sitting by the door. I checked my GPS. It was set for the Riverside Inn, route already calculated, 3 hours and 12 minutes. I deleted the destination, unpacked my bag, went to bed with my door locked and my phone in my hand. But when I woke up this morning, my car keys were on the kitchen counter instead of the hook where I always leave them. And my GPS was set again, Riverside Inn, room 309. I'm supposed to check out tomorrow according to that reservation. But I'm starting to think checkout isn't really an option. That once you're in the system, once the room knows your name and your face and your handwriting, you're always coming back. Tonight is the first night of that reservation. I've been sitting here at my kitchen table for 3 hours, trying not to get in my car, trying not to drive, but part of me knows I will. Part of me is already there, waiting in room 309, wondering when the rest of me will finally arrive. Story 6. Housekeeping came too early. She was dusting my nightstand in complete darkness, her movements precise and mechanical, while I lay frozen in bed watching her silhouette move through my room like she'd done this 1,000 times before. When she walked into the bathroom and closed the door, I finally found the courage to run. but the mirror was still fogged with steam when I looked inside, and someone had written in the condensation, "I clean this room every morning at 6 a.m. You weren't here yesterday, you won't be here tomorrow." I checked out immediately, but she was standing in the parking lot as I drove away, perfectly still, watching me with a small smile that said she knew something I didn't, knew that I'd be back, and next time I wouldn't wake up. I pulled into the Sunset Lodge around midnight on a Saturday, so exhausted I could barely see straight. I'd been driving for 16 hours straight from Colorado to California, pushing through to make a Sunday morning brunch with my sister, who I hadn't seen in 3 years. The plan had been to drive through the night, but by the time I hit Central California, my eyes were closing on their own. I nearly drifted into the guardrail twice. I had to stop. The Sunset Lodge appeared on the highway like a gift, a 2-story budget hotel with vacancy signs lit up and a 24-hour check-in. I pulled into the parking lot, grabbed my overnight bag, and stumbled into the lobby. The night clerk was a young guy, early 20s maybe, scrolling through his phone. He checked me in without much conversation, handed me a key card, and told me breakfast started at 6. I barely heard him. I just needed a bed. Room 218, second floor. I found it easily enough, unlocked the door, and stepped into darkness. I was too tired to even turn on the main light, just used the glow from my phone to navigate to the bed. I kicked off my shoes, set my phone on the nightstand to charge, and face planted into the pillows. I was asleep within seconds. I woke up to the sound of someone moving around my room. For a confused moment, I thought I was dreaming, but as I surfaced into consciousness, the sounds became clear and immediate. Fabric rustling, the soft brush of something against furniture. The quiet, efficient movements of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. I opened my eyes to complete darkness. The blackout curtains were closed. No light from the parking lot, no glow from my phone, nothing. But I could see a shape moving near the desk, a darker shadow against the darkness, human-sized. Terror locked my body in place. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My mind scrambled to make sense of what I was seeing. Someone had broken into my room. Someone was robbing me. I needed to scream, needed to run, but my body wouldn't respond. The figure moved to the window and I heard the whisper of cloth. They were wiping down the windowsill. Then they moved to the dresser, the same slow, deliberate motions. They were dusting, housekeeping. The realization should have been reassuring, but it wasn't. It was 6 a.m. I could see the faint red glow of the alarm clock across the room now that my eyes had adjusted. Way too early for housekeeping, and I'd hung the Do Not Disturb sign on my door. I specifically remembered hanging it before I collapsed into bed. The figure moved closer to the bed, close enough that I could make out more details now. A woman, average height, wearing what looked like a housekeeping uniform. Dark polo shirt and pants. She was dusting the nightstand just a few feet from where I lay, frozen under the covers. She never turned on the lights, never acknowledged me. She moved with mechanical precision through the darkness, like she'd cleaned this exact room in this exact way so many times she didn't need to see what she was doing. I wanted to say something, to tell her to stop, to leave, to ask what the hell she was doing. But my voice was trapped in my throat. Some primitive part of my brain was screaming that if I made a sound, if I drew her attention, something terrible would happen. She finished with the nightstand and moved toward the bathroom. I heard the door close softly, heard water running. That broke the spell. I sat up fast, reaching for my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock it. I pulled up the front desk number and called, bringing the phone to my ear. It rang, and rang, and rang, 6 times before going to voicemail. I hung up and tried again. Same thing, 6 rings, voicemail. The water in the bathroom shut off. I heard the door handle turn. I threw off the covers and lunged for the main door, not bothering with shoes or my bag or anything except getting out of this room. My hands fumbled with the deadbolt and the security latch, panic making me clumsy. Behind me, I heard the bathroom door open. I got the door unlocked and yanked it open, stumbling out into the hallway. The fluorescent lights were harsh after the darkness of the room. I stood there breathing hard, my heart slamming against my ribs, and looked back at the open doorway of room 218. The lights were still off inside. I couldn't see anyone moving. But I knew she was in there. I went straight to the front desk, practically running. The same guy from last night was still there, though he looked more alert now, probably near the end of his shift. "Someone's in my room," I said, my voice coming out high and shaky. Housekeeping came in while I was sleeping. In the dark, I had the Do Not Disturb sign up. He looked confused. "Housekeeping doesn't start until 7 on weekends. It's only 6 now." I know what time it is. Someone was in my room. They were cleaning in the dark while I was in bed. "Sir, I promise you, no housekeeping staff would do that. Are you sure you weren't dreaming?" I wasn't dreaming. Someone was in my room. They went into my bathroom and I heard water running. He picked up the phone and called someone, spoke briefly, then hung up. "Housekeeping supervisor is coming down, but she confirms no one from her team would be working yet and definitely wouldn't enter a room with a D&D sign." 5 minutes later, a woman in her 50s arrived, introducing herself as Maria, the head of housekeeping. She listened to my story with a serious expression, asked a few questions, then offered to go check room 218 with me. We took the elevator back up. I stayed in the hallway while Maria used her master key to open the door. She turned on all the lights and checked the room thoroughly, bathroom, closet, under the bed. "There's no one here," she said, emerging back into the hallway. "Everything looks normal." But there was someone. I saw them. She gave me a sympathetic look that made me feel like a child. Sometimes when people are very tired, they can experience sleep paralysis or hypnagogic hallucinations. It can seem very real, but I wasn't hallucinating. I was awake. I heard them moving around, heard the water running. Maria walked to the bathroom and checked the sink. "The sink is dry," she said. "The towels are all perfectly folded, haven't been touched." I pushed past her to look for myself. She was right. The sink was bone dry. The mirror was clear, no steam or water spots. The hand towels were folded in neat geometric shapes on the rack. But I heard. "I believe you heard something," Maria said gently. "Old buildings make noise. Pipes, heating systems, guests in other rooms. Sometimes it can sound like it's right in your room." I stood there staring at that dry sink, trying to understand. I knew what I'd heard. I knew what I'd seen. But there was no evidence. No wet sink, no footprints, nothing. "Would you like to move to a different room?" Maria asked. "Or we can comp your stay if you'd prefer to leave." I wanted to leave, but it was 6:15 in the morning. I was supposed to be at my sister's by 10, and I desperately needed a shower and some coffee before facing another 4 hours of driving. "I'll stay," I said finally. "But I'm leaving the lights on." Maria nodded, left me a card with her direct extension, and told me to call if I needed anything else. After she left, I checked every inch of that room, behind the curtains, inside the closet, under the bed. Nothing. Just a generic hotel room that now felt contaminated by what I'd experienced. I took a fast shower, dressed, and packed my bag. It was only 6:45, but I was ready to get out of there. I'd grab coffee on the road. As I was checking my phone one last time before leaving, I noticed something on the bathroom mirror. A smudge. Small, barely visible, but definitely there. I walked closer. It was a fingerprint. A single clear fingerprint in the center of the mirror, about eye height. But the strange thing was how it looked. It wasn't like someone had touched the mirror and left their natural oils behind. This print looked like it had been made in steam or fog, the mark of someone touching condensation. But the mirror was completely dry. And Maria had been right. The bathroom showed no signs of use since it had been cleaned. No moisture, no steam. I stared at that fingerprint for a long moment, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. Then I grabbed my bag and left. I made it to my sister's house on time, had a nice brunch, tried to act normal. But I couldn't stop thinking about that dark figure moving through my room, the sound of water running, that fingerprint on the mirror that shouldn't have been possible. 2 weeks later, I was back in Colorado and mostly convinced that Maria had been right. Exhaustion, weird sounds from other rooms, my tired brain making connections that weren't there. It had seemed so real in the moment, but memory is unreliable. I was ready to file it away as a weird experience and move on. Then I got an email from the Sunset Lodge. "Dear valued guest, we noticed you recently stayed with us and we hope you enjoyed your visit. We'd love to hear your feedback. Standard follow-up email." I almost deleted it, but something made me click through to their guest portal, and I saw that they'd linked my previous stay to my email. When I clicked on the reservation, it showed my room number 218 and gave me the option to see photos of the room. I clicked on it. The room looked exactly as I remembered it. Same layout, same generic furniture. But there was a guest review attached from someone who'd stayed there a month before my visit. The review was 2 stars and it said, "Room was clean but very strange experience. Housekeeping came in at 6 a.m. even though I had DND sign up. They were cleaning in the dark and wouldn't respond when I called out. Asked front desk about it, but they said no one was scheduled that early. Very unsettling." My hands went cold as I read it. I scrolled down and found another review from 3 months before that. "Do not stay in room 218. Someone came into my room before dawn and started cleaning. I couldn't get them to leave or respond to me. When I turned on the lights, no one was there. Felt like I was losing my mind." And another from 5 months ago. "Room 218 is haunted or something. Housekeeping comes at 6 a.m. every morning in the dark. Management claims it doesn't happen, but I know what I saw." There were 6 reviews total over the past year, all specifically mentioning room 218, all describing the same experience. Housekeeping arriving at 6 a.m., working in the dark, not responding to guests, vanishing without explanation. I called the Sunset Lodge immediately and asked to speak to a manager. It took 15 minutes of being transferred around before I finally got someone. "This is Daniel, general manager. How can I help you? I stayed in room 218 2 weeks ago and had a very disturbing experience, but it looks like I'm not the first person. There are multiple reviews describing the same thing. What's going on in that room?" Silence on the other end. Then, "Sir, I'm not sure what you're referring to. Could you describe your experience?" I told him everything. The dark figure, the housekeeping movements, the water running, the fingerprint. When I finished, there was another long silence. "We've had some reports about room 218, he said carefully. "Guests experiencing things we can't explain. We've had the room checked multiple times, structural inspection, electrical, plumbing, even brought in someone to test for carbon monoxide or other environmental factors. Everything comes back normal. So you know the room is a problem and you're still renting it out?" "Sir, we can't refuse to rent a room just because some guests claim to have had unusual experiences. There's no evidence of anything actually wrong with the room. Many guests stay there without incident." "Has anyone checked the history of the hotel, the staff? Maybe someone who worked there?" "Sir, I really can't discuss personnel matters, but I can assure you we take guest safety very seriously." He was shutting down, going into corporate defense mode. I wasn't going to get anything useful from him. After I hung up, I did some research on my own. The Sunset Lodge had been operating since 1987, built on the site of an older motel that had burned down in the early 80s. Most of what I found was routine. Business licenses, health inspections, nothing unusual. But then I found an old newspaper article from 1982, archived on a local history website. 3 killed in motel fire. The article described how a fire had broken out at the old Sunset Motor Inn in the early morning hours of March 15, 1982. 3 people had died, 2 guests and a housekeeper who'd been working an early shift, arriving at 6 a.m. to start cleaning rooms. The fire had started on the 2nd floor, cause undetermined. The housekeeper's name was listed as Teresa Vance, age 43, mother of 2. 6 a.m., 2nd floor. A housekeeper arriving early. I looked up the room numbering for the old motel using archived photos from the Historical Society website. The layout was slightly different from the current building, but when I mapped it out, the room where the fire had started would have been in approximately the same location as current-day room 218. Teresa Vance had died doing her job, arriving early on a Saturday morning to clean rooms, probably trying to get a head start on the day. She'd been found in the room where the fire started, overcome by smoke, and now, over 40 years later, she was still showing up for her shift. Still cleaning room 218 every morning at 6 a.m., moving through the darkness with the muscle memory of thousands of identical mornings, not acknowledging guests because in her mind, or whatever remained of it, the room was supposed to be empty. I haven't been back to the Sunset Lodge. I don't plan to ever go back. But sometimes when I wake up in hotel rooms in that gray period between night and dawn, I listen carefully to the silence. I check the door to make sure the deadbolt is latched and the security bar is in place. Because I know now that do not disturb signs don't work on everyone. Some people have been doing their job for so long that they can't stop, can't rest, can't acknowledge that their shift ended decades ago. And if you're unlucky enough to be in the room they've been cleaning every morning for the last 40 years, they'll come right in at 6 a.m., regardless of what signs you put on your door. They'll work in the dark because that's how they've always done it. They'll move through your space like you're not there because in their reality you're not. And when you finally flee in terror, they'll finish their work in silence, fog the mirror with steam that shouldn't exist, and leave a single fingerprint to mark that they were there. Just doing their job, same as always. Same as they'll be doing tomorrow morning and the morning after that, and every morning until the building is torn down or burns again. Story 7. The Guest Book. I found yesterday's date in the guest book. My signature, my room number, identical handwriting. But I'd arrived today, just an hour ago, for my first time at this inn. I flipped back through the pages and found my name repeated month after month for the past 6 months, every entry in my own hand, documenting visits I'd never made. The entries became increasingly disturbed. Why can't I remember leaving, and this is the last time, and someone else is signing for me? The final entry before today was dated last week, and I'd written in shaky letters, "If you're reading this and you're me, don't stay in 412 tonight, please. I'm begging you, don't let them make you stay." The Pinecrest Inn looked exactly like the photos online. A renovated Victorian tucked into the mountains of upstate New York. All white clapboard and black shutters with a wide front porch where guests could sit in rocking chairs and watch the sunset. I'd booked it on impulse during a weekend trip to see fall foliage, one of those spontaneous travel decisions that usually work out better in theory than practice. But when I pulled up on that Friday afternoon in late October, the place looked perfect. Quaint without being tacky, historic without being decrepit, the kind of place you'd recommend to friends. I grabbed my duffel from the back seat and headed inside. The lobby was small but charming. Original hardwood floors, a stone fireplace, antique furniture that actually looked comfortable. And there, On a small writing desk near the entrance sat a leather-bound book with a small brass plaque that read Guest Register. I'd seen these before at historic hotels and bed and breakfasts. A physical guest book where visitors sign their names as a keepsake. Part nostalgia, part charm. While waiting for someone to appear at the front desk, I walked over and flipped through the pages. The signatures went back years, guests leaving little comments about their stays. Beautiful place, hope to return. Wonderful hosts, perfect weekend getaway. Anniversary trip, couldn't have asked for better. I was about to flip to a blank page when my own name caught my eye. Jordan Garrett. I stopped, stared at the signature. It was dated 6 months ago, April 15th. Room 412. The handwriting matched mine perfectly, down to the way I looped the J and the slight backward slant of my capital G. But I'd never been to the Pinecrest Inn before. Never even heard of it until 3 days ago when I'd found it on a travel website. I looked closer at the signature, trying to find some difference that would prove it wasn't actually mine. Maybe someone with the same name. Similar handwriting. That had to be it. But no. The more I stared, the more certain I became. That was my signature. The small quirks that I'd had since learning cursive in 3rd grade. The way I connected certain letters, the pressure of the pen that was heavier on downstrokes. This was my handwriting. "Can I help you?" I jumped and turned around. A woman in her 60s stood behind the front desk, smiling pleasantly. She must have come from a back office while I was examining the guest book. "Yes, hi. I have a reservation. Jordan Garrett." "Of course. Welcome back." Her smile widened. "It's wonderful to have you return. Let me get you checked in." "Welcome back." "I'm sorry," I said carefully, "but I've never been here before. This is my first visit." She glanced at her computer screen, then back at me. "Oh, I apologize. I thought... Well, let me just pull up your reservation." She typed for a moment, then looked confused. "That's strange. You're in room 412, which is our preferred repeat guest room. But if you haven't stayed with us before, can I ask why you thought I'd been here before?" "Well, your name was familiar, and room 412 is typically reserved for guests who've stayed with us previously. But I must have been thinking of someone else. My mistake." She handed me an old-fashioned metal key. "Top of the stairs, last door on the right. Breakfast is served from 7 to 9 in the dining room. If you need anything at all, just let us know." I took the key, an actual key, not a card, which somehow made the confusion worse, and started toward the stairs. Then I stopped and went back to the guest book. "Is this all of your guest records?" I asked. The woman looked over. "That's just the guest book for visitors to sign. We keep our actual records digitally now. The guest book is more of a tradition." I nodded slowly, flipped back to April 15th and turned the book around to show her. "This signature here for room 412, can you tell me who signed this?" She came around the desk and looked at it, adjusting her glasses. "Well, that appears to be Jordan Garrett, April 15th, room 412. She looked up at me. "Is there a problem?" "That's my name. That's my signature, but I wasn't here in April. I've never been here before today." She studied the signature more carefully, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "That is quite a coincidence. Perhaps another Jordan Garrett. It's not an uncommon name. Look at the handwriting. That's not just similar, that's identical to how I write." She was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Garrett, I'm not sure what you'd like me to say. Someone signed our guest book 6 months ago with your name. If it wasn't you, then I suppose someone else has very similar handwriting." I wanted to argue more, but I could hear how I sounded. Paranoid, insistent, making a scene about something that couldn't possibly matter. "Right. Sorry, I'm sure it's just a weird coincidence." but as I walked toward the stairs, I heard her pick up the phone and speak in a low voice to someone. "James, could you come to the front desk for a moment?" Room 412 was at the end of a long hallway, tucked under the eaves where the ceiling slanted downward. The room was cozy in the way old houses are. Small windows with lace curtains, an iron bed frame with a handmade quilt, a writing desk that faced the window. Everything smelled like lavender and old wood. I dropped my bag on the bed and immediately went to check the room for anything unusual. I don't know what I was looking for. Evidence that I'd been here before, maybe. Some sign that would explain the signature in the guest book. But everything was standard guest room fare. Clean towels in the bathroom, complimentary toiletries, a small welcome basket with tea bags and local honey. Nothing personal, nothing of mine. I sat down at the writing desk and tried to think rationally. Someone with my name had stayed here 6 months ago. Someone with handwriting remarkably similar to mine. It was disturbing, sure, but not impossible. The world was full of strange coincidences. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "Have fun on your spontaneous adventure. Send pics of the foliage." I typed back that I'd arrived safely and the place was nice, then opened my laptop to do some work. I had a few emails to catch up on, some reports to review before Monday. Typical Friday evening, just in a different location. I worked for about an hour before I noticed the guest book on the desk. Not the big leather one from downstairs. This was smaller, about the size of a journal with a maroon cover. It was tucked between a lamp and a small vase of dried flowers, positioned like part of the room's decor. I picked it up and opened it. It was a room-specific guest book, I realized, a place for guests who stayed in room 412 to leave comments or notes about their experience. The first entry was dated 2019, when the inn had reopened after renovations. First guest in the newly restored room 412, absolutely beautiful. Thank you for the warm hospitality. I flipped through more entries. Most were brief and complimentary. Then I got to April 15th, 6 months ago. My handwriting again, my signature. But this time there was a comment. "Second stay at Pinecrest. Room 412 is quickly becoming my favorite spot. There's something peaceful about this space. Looking forward to returning soon." Second stay. Whoever had signed this claimed it was their second visit. I flipped backward, looking for an earlier entry. I found it in January, 3 months before. "Jordan Garrett, room 412. First time at the Pinecrest Inn. The room is exactly what I needed, quiet, comfortable, away from everything. Will definitely be back." My signature, both times. I kept flipping backward and my stomach dropped. Every month going back 6 months, there was an entry from Jordan Garrett in room 412, all in my handwriting, all describing return visits to this place I'd never been. And the entries were getting stranger. From 3 months ago. "Fifth visit, strange dreams here, but I always feel compelled to return. Can't quite explain it." From 2 months ago. 6th stay. "I keep having the same dream about signing the guest book downstairs. When I checked today, I didn't remember signing it. Memory playing tricks?" From 6 weeks ago. 7th visit. "I drove here without really planning to, almost like autopilot. Why do I keep coming back to room 412? From last month. 8th stay. "I looked through this room guest book today and saw all my previous entries. I don't remember writing most of them. This should disturb me more than it does." The most recent entry was from last week. If you're reading this and you're me, if you're Jordan Garrett and you somehow ended up in room 412 without remembering the previous visits, please listen. Don't stay tonight. I don't know what's happening, but I think the room is making us come back, making us sign the books, making us forget. Every time I leave, I lose the memory of being here, but some part of me keeps returning. I'm going to try to break the cycle. If this is the last entry, I succeeded. If there's another entry after this, I failed. Please, please try to leave before it gets dark. Don't let them make you stay. My hands were shaking so badly the book almost fell from my grip. This wasn't possible. Someone was messing with me, had to be. An elaborate prank, or maybe I was having some kind of breakdown and had been coming here without remembering, exactly like the entries described. I grabbed my phone and checked my calendar, my emails, my credit card statements, looking for any gap in my memory, any evidence of previous trips to upstate New York that I'd somehow forgotten. Nothing. My calendar showed I'd been at work every day for the last 6 months except for normal weekends and a week of vacation in July that I'd spent visiting family in Oregon. My credit card showed no charges to the Pinecrest Inn before this week's reservation, but I was holding evidence in my hands. 8 entries in my own handwriting, documenting visits I had no memory of making. I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my room, then a soft knock. "Mr. Garrett?" A male voice, older, unfamiliar. "This is James, one of the owners. Could I speak with you for a moment?" I set down the guest book and opened the door. A man in his 70s stood in the hallway, dressed casually in slacks and a cardigan. He had kind eyes but a serious expression. "I apologized for the intrusion," he said. "My wife mentioned you had some concerns about the guest register downstairs. May I come in?" I stepped aside and let him enter. He glanced around the room, his gaze landing briefly on the small guest book I'd left open on the desk. "I see you found the room's personal guest book," he said quietly. "Yeah, and I found something impossible." I showed him the entries, all signed in my handwriting dating back months. He read them without visible surprise, which somehow made it worse. "Mr. Garrett, I'm going to be honest with you because I think you deserve to know. You're not the first person this has happened to." My mouth went dry. "What do you mean?" "Room 412 has a pattern. Every few years we get a guest who starts returning regularly, monthly visits, sometimes more frequent. They always stay in this room, always sign both guest books, always leave positive reviews. Then after several months, the visits stop. Just stop completely. When we try to reach them for feedback or special offers, we find out they have no memory of ever staying here. That's not possible." "I know, but it keeps happening. We've had it investigated, checked for gas leaks, carbon monoxide, even hired a private detective to look into whether someone was impersonating guests. Everything came back normal. The only unusual thing is the pattern." "So what? The room is haunted, it makes people come back?" "I don't know what it is, but I can tell you this. Every guest who's experienced this has always left safely. They finish their stay, check out normally, and then later have no memory of their visits here. No harm comes to them aside from the missing memories. The last entry in this book says not to stay the night. It says the room makes people come back, makes them forget." James picked up the guest book and read the entry I was pointing to. His expression tightened. "That's concerning. We've never had a guest leave a warning before." He closed the book and looked at me seriously. "Mr. Garrett, I'm not going to force you to stay. If you want to leave right now, we'll refund your payment in full, no questions asked. But I can also tell you that in the 10 years we've owned this inn, no guest has ever been harmed by staying in room 412. Confused, certainly, but not harmed." I stood there trying to process everything. The rational part of my brain was screaming to leave, to get in my car and drive back to the city and forget this entire weekend. But another part, a part I didn't quite trust, wanted to stay, wanted to understand what was happening. "If I stay," I said slowly, "will I remember this conversation tomorrow? I honestly don't know. None of the previous guests remembered anything about their visits. And you're okay with that?" Just renting out a room that messes with people's memories? We've considered closing the room permanently, but as I said, no one has ever been harmed, and some guests, the ones who return multiple times before the pattern ends, they always seem happy during their stays. Peaceful. Like they're finding something here they need. I looked around the room again. It did feel peaceful, comfortable in a way that went beyond just good hospitality. Like I belonged here, even though I'd never been here before. Or had I? I'm going to stay, I heard myself say. At least for tonight, I want to understand what's happening. James nodded slowly. That's your choice. But Mr. Garrett, if at any point you feel uncomfortable or want to leave, please don't hesitate. We'll have staff available all night. After he left, I sat at the desk for a long time, staring at that room guest book. 8 entries in my handwriting. 8 visits I couldn't remember. I opened my laptop and started documenting everything. Took photos of every entry, wrote down detailed notes about the conversation with James, created a file with timestamps and GPS data proving where I'd been for the last 6 months. If I was going to lose my memory of this place, at least I'd have evidence to find when I got home. As the sun set, I felt a strange calm settling over me. The anxiety and fear from earlier faded, replaced by a peaceful drowsiness. I climbed into bed around 9, much earlier than my usual bedtime, and fell asleep almost immediately. I woke up at dawn to the sound of birds and golden light filtering through the lace curtains. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. Then it came back in pieces. The guest book, the signatures, James's warning. I sat up fast and grabbed my phone, opened the notes I'd made last night. They were gone, not deleted. The note app showed no recent deletions. Just gone, like I'd never written them. The photos I'd taken of the guest book entries were gone too. My hands were shaking as I got out of bed and checked my laptop. The folder I'd created was still there, but it was empty. Every file, every piece of evidence I'd saved, gone. I grabbed the room guest book from the desk and flipped to the last page with writing. There was a new entry dated today in my handwriting. 9th visit, I finally understand. The room isn't keeping me here. I'm choosing to come back. Every time I leave, I forget, but some part of me remembers the peace I feel here. I'll be back next month. I always come back. Below that, in shakier handwriting that looked like it had been added hastily. I didn't write that. I'm leaving now. I'm not coming back. This is Jordan Garrett, dated today, and I'm leaving right now. I stared at both entries. I had no memory of writing either of them. I packed my bag in under 3 minutes and practically ran downstairs. The woman from yesterday was at the front desk, smiling pleasantly. Checking out early, Mr. Garrett? Yes, right now. Of course, I hope everything was satisfactory with your stay. I need to know something. Did I come down here last night after I went to my room? She looked confused. No, I don't believe so. I left around 7 and the night staff didn't mention seeing you. Why do you ask? What about early this morning? I've only been here since 6, but again, no one mentioned seeing you until just now. I couldn't explain the entries in the room guest book then. Couldn't explain who had written them if not me. She processed my checkout quickly and I headed for the door, then stopped. The guest book was still sitting on the writing desk near the entrance. I had to look. I flipped to yesterday's date and found my signature, my handwriting documenting my check-in. But next to the room number, I'd written something else. Room 412, 9th visit. See you next month. I slammed the book shut and walked out. I drove straight through to the city, 5 hours without stopping, hands gripping the wheel like I was afraid I'd turn around if I loosened my hold. When I got home, I went through everything. My calendar, my emails, my bank statements, my car's GPS history. No evidence of ever having been to the Pinecrest Inn before yesterday. But this morning I got an email confirmation. A reservation at the Pinecrest Inn for next month, same weekend, room 412. I didn't make that reservation. I've tried to cancel it 4 times. The cancellation won't process. And the worst part, the part that keeps me up at night, is that I'm not sure I want to cancel it. Because when I think about that room, about the peace I felt there, I want to go back. Some part of me is already planning the drive, already looking forward to checking in, already anticipating the comfort of room 412. I'm terrified that next month I'll get in my car without quite meaning to, and I'll drive to the Pinecrest Inn and I'll sign that guest book for the 10th time. And the month after that will be the 11th. And eventually I'll stop fighting it. I'll stop trying to remember. I'll just accept that one weekend a month I disappear into room 412 and lose a few days of memory in exchange for whatever peace that place offers. Part of me thinks that would be okay. That's the part that scares me most. Story 8. The Connecting Door. I woke up to find the connecting door standing wide open, spilling sickly yellow light across my floor. And when I looked inside, I saw the other room exactly as it had been. Completely empty, furniture gone, wallpaper peeling, water damage spreading across the ceiling like a dark stain. But I could still hear breathing, close and ragged, coming from somewhere in that empty space. I stepped back and the door slammed shut so hard the walls shook. When I looked down, I saw what I'd been too terrified to notice before. Wet footprints leading from the connecting door to my bed, back and forth, like someone had been pacing beside me while I slept. The prints were still wet. They were still forming. I checked into the Ocean View Suites on a Monday afternoon in March, booking 3 nights for a work training session that would keep me in the area through Thursday. The hotel was newer, maybe 5 or 6 years old, with that contemporary design that prioritized clean lines and neutral colors. My room was on the 4th floor, 412, and it was perfectly adequate. King bed, small sitting area, desk with good lighting for working, decent view of the parking lot and a slice of ocean in the distance. What I noticed immediately was the connecting door. It was positioned between the bed and the sitting area, a standard door that would link my room to 414 next door. Both sides would need to be unlocked for it to open, a privacy feature meant to accommodate families or groups traveling together. The deadbolt on my side was clearly visible, a brass fixture that was currently locked. I didn't think much about it. I've stayed in dozens of hotels with connecting doors. You make sure your side is locked and forget it exists. That first night I fell asleep around 11 after a long day of travel and the opening session of training. The room was quiet except for the hum of the heating unit and occasional sounds from the hallway. People coming back from late dinners, elevators dinging, the normal ambient noise of a hotel. I woke up around 2 a.m. to voices. They were coming from the room next door, room 414, filtering through the connecting door. A couple arguing in tense whispers, the kind of fight that people have when they're trying to stay quiet but can't quite manage it. I couldn't make out the words, just the tone. Frustrated, angry, the back and forth of an argument that had been going on a while. I pulled the pillow over my head and tried to go back to sleep. The arguing continued for maybe 20 minutes, then stopped. I drifted back to sleep. The second night, the same thing happened. 2 a.m., voices through the connecting door. This time I could hear them more clearly, a man and a woman, the man's voice louder and more aggressive. "Not doing this again. You said you would. Tired of your..." I rolled over and tried to ignore it. Hotel walls were thin. People had arguments. It wasn't my business. After about 15 minutes, the voices stopped and were replaced by long silences, punctuated by occasional thuds, like someone moving furniture or dropping luggage. I made a mental note to mention it to the front desk in the morning if it happened again. By the third night, Wednesday, I was exhausted from the training sessions and desperately needed uninterrupted sleep. I went to bed at 10:30, hoping to get a full night before the final day of training. 2 a.m., like clockwork, but this time there were no voices, just the sounds I'd heard at the end of the previous night, long silences and occasional thuds. Then maybe 10 minutes after I woke up, I heard footsteps. They were pacing back and forth in room 414, steady and rhythmic. Walk to one end of the room, pause, walk back. Over and over, I lay there listening, irritated and unsettled. Something about the pacing felt wrong. It was too steady, too mechanical, like whoever was walking had been doing it for hours without stopping. After about 20 minutes, I got out of bed and walked over to the connecting door. I pressed my ear against it, listening. The footsteps were right on the other side, walking back and forth just beyond the door, maybe 6 or 7 steps each direction. I could hear breathing too. Heavy, ragged breathing that didn't match the steady rhythm of the footsteps. "Hello?" I called out, loud enough to be heard through the door. "Could you keep it down? It's 2 in the morning." The footsteps stopped. The breathing continued. I waited, ear still pressed against the door, listening. 30 seconds, a minute, no movement, no response. Just that breathing, slow, wet, labored. Then something pressed against the other side of the door. I felt it more than heard it. A weight settling against the door right where my ear was positioned. Like someone was leaning their full body weight against it from the other side, or pressing their face to the door the same way I was pressing mine. I jerked backward, my heart suddenly racing. I stared at the door, at the brass deadbolt that was definitely locked, and tried to rationalize what I'd just felt. A guest in the next room had leaned against the connecting door. That was all. Maybe they'd heard me call out and came to respond, or maybe they were just resting against it. Normal explanation, but it didn't feel normal. I checked the deadbolt again, still locked, and went back to bed. The pacing resumed after a few minutes, that same steady rhythm. I put in earplugs and eventually fell asleep. The next morning, Thursday, I went down to the front desk before heading to my training session. "I'm in room 412, I told the clerk, a young woman with a professional smile. "I've been hearing noise from the room next door, 414, for the last few nights around 2 a.m. Arguing, pacing, lots of activity. Is there any way to move me to a different room or maybe speak to the guests next door about keeping it down?" She typed on her computer, frowning slightly. "Room 414. Let me check." More typing. Then her expression shifted to confusion. "Sir, according to our system, room 414 is vacant. Has been vacant since Monday. We don't have anyone checked in there." My stomach dropped. "That's not possible. I've heard people in that room every night around 2 a.m. "I understand, but I'm looking at our occupancy right now, and 414 shows as available and hasn't been rented this week." She paused. "Could the sound be coming from a different room? Maybe 416 on the other side, or 414 on a different floor?" "No, it's definitely coming through the connecting door between my room and 414. She looked uncomfortable now. "Would you like me to send someone up to check the room? Just to make sure there's no maintenance issue or anything unusual?" "Yes, please." She made a quick phone call, and within 5 minutes, a member of the maintenance staff met me on the 4th floor. He was an older guy, maybe 60, with a key ring full of master keys. "You're hearing noises from 414? He asked as we walked down the hallway. "Yeah, voices, footsteps, lots of activity, but apparently no one's checked in there." He unlocked the door to 414 and pushed it open. "Let's take a look." I followed him inside and stopped cold. The room was completely empty. Not empty like a cleaned hotel room waiting for guests. Empty like it was being renovated. There was no furniture, no bed, no desk, no chairs. The wallpaper was peeling in long strips, exposing water-damaged drywall underneath. The ceiling had dark stains spreading across it, the kind that suggests a serious leak from the floor above. The carpet had been torn up in sections, revealing stained concrete underneath. "What the hell?" I said. The maintenance guy looked around with a grim expression. "Yeah, 4R14 has been out of commission for about 2 months. Water damage from a pipe burst upstairs. We're waiting on contractors to start the renovation work. But I've been hearing people in here. Voices, footsteps, someone pacing back and forth every night." He walked further into the gutted room, checking the walls and the floor. "Sound can travel funny in hotels. What you're hearing is probably coming from 416 or from a different floor. The walls are open in here." He gestured to where chunks of drywall had been removed. "So sound is going to echo weird." I walked over to the connecting door on the 414 side. It was closed, but I could see that the deadbolt on this side wasn't just locked, it was sealed. Someone had painted over it, layers of white paint covering the brass fixture, making it impossible to turn. "This door has been sealed," I said. "How long?" The maintenance guy came over to look. "Probably when they started the renovation work. We seal connecting doors when rooms are out of service, so guests in the adjacent room don't accidentally open them and see the construction mess." "So there's no way this door could have been opened from this side?" "Not without breaking the paint seal, which would be pretty obvious." He looked at me with a mix of sympathy and skepticism. "Look, I know hotels can be creepy at night, especially when you're staying alone. But I promise you nobody's been in this room. It's been locked and empty for weeks." I wanted to argue, to insist that I knew what I'd heard, but standing in that gutted room in the middle of the day, my certainty wavered. Maybe he was right. Maybe the sound was coming from somewhere else and the connecting door was just amplifying it weird ways. "Thanks for checking," I said finally. He nodded and locked the door behind us as we left. "If you hear anything else tonight, call the desk and we'll investigate further. But I think you'll find it's just normal hotel noise." I went to my training session, but I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about that empty room, about the peeling wallpaper and water damage, about how certain I'd been that I was hearing people right on the other side of that connecting door. That night, my last night at the hotel, I almost asked to change rooms, but it was late when I got back from the training wrap-up dinner and I was leaving first thing in the morning. One more night and I'd be done. I checked the connecting door before bed, deadbolt definitely locked, and set my phone alarm for 6 a.m. so I could get an early start. I fell asleep around 11. I woke up to light spilling across my floor. For a confused moment, I thought I'd forgotten to close the bathroom door. But the bathroom was dark. The light was coming from somewhere else. I sat up and my heart stopped. The connecting door was open, not just unlocked. Standing wide open, the door swung completely back and yellow light was pouring through from room 414. I could see into the space beyond, and it looked exactly as it had that afternoon. Empty, gutted wallpaper peeling, ceiling stained with water damage. But I could hear breathing. Close, ragged, wet breathing coming from inside that empty room. I was frozen, sitting up in bed, staring at that open door. The deadbolt on my side was still in the locked position, though obviously that meant nothing since the door was open. On the other side, in the gutted room, I could see the sealed deadbolt still covered in layers of white paint. Neither deadbolt had been turned. Both were still locked. But the door was wide open. The breathing got louder. I forced myself to move, swinging my legs out of bed, my eyes never leaving that open doorway. I took a step toward it, then another, drawn by some horrible need to understand what was happening. That's when I saw the footprints. They were on my carpet, leading from the connecting door to my bed. Wet footprints like someone had been walking through water. They went from the doorway to the side of my bed, then back to the doorway, then back to the bed. Multiple paths layered over each other like someone had been pacing back and forth while I slept. I looked down at my feet. I was standing right next to one of the wet prints, and as I watched, a new print appeared on the carpet. Then another, then another. Something was walking toward me from the connecting door. Something I couldn't see. The prints appeared one after another, slow and deliberate, accompanied by that ragged breathing that was getting closer. I ran. I grabbed my phone and my keys and ran for the hallway door, fumbling with the deadbolt and security latch. Behind me, I heard the connecting door slam shut with a force that shook the walls and knocked a picture frame to the floor. I got my door open and stumbled into the hallway, gasping, shaking so hard I could barely stand. A couple walking past their room stopped and stared at me. "Are you okay?" the woman asked. "The connecting door, someone was in my room. Do you want us to call security?" "Yes, please. Call security." 2 security guards arrived within 5 minutes and checked my room thoroughly. The connecting door was closed, deadbolt locked on my side. They checked 414 with a master key, still gutted, still empty, still locked. No signs of anyone having been inside. No water on the floors, no wet footprints. But I knew what I'd seen. They offered to move me to a different room, but I checked out instead. Left at 3 in the morning, drove to a different hotel and spent the rest of the night with every light on, unable to sleep. I've tried to make sense of it since then. Tried to find rational explanations. Maybe I was sleepwalking and opened the door myself in some fugue state. Maybe the whole thing was a dream, a hallucination brought on by stress and exhaustion. But I can't explain the footprints appearing on the carpet while I watched. Can't explain how a door with locked deadbolts on both sides could swing wide open. Last week, I got a survey email from the Ocean View Suites asking about my stay. I started to fill it out, got to the comments section and typed, "Room 414 is not empty." Then I deleted it and closed the browser. Because what could I possibly say that wouldn't sound insane? That something was living in that gutted room. That it had been pacing back and forth for weeks, maybe months, walking through the space where furniture used to be. That it had been watching me through the connecting door, waiting for the right moment to cross over. I think about that maintenance guy saying the door had been sealed for weeks. I think about how certain I was that someone was pressed against the other side, breathing, listening. And I think about those footprints appearing one after another on my carpet, coming closer. Something had been in room 414 the whole time. Something that didn't need the deadbolts to be unlocked. Something that only came through when conditions were right. Maybe at 2 a.m., maybe on the 3rd night, maybe when it had watched long enough to know you were deeply asleep. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't woken up, if I hadn't seen the door standing open and run. But I know this. Connecting doors exist so people can pass between rooms. They're meant to link spaces, to create passages where walls would otherwise separate. And sometimes, the things on the other side have been waiting a very long time for someone to unlock their side of the door. Even if you never turn your deadbolt, even if you keep it locked every single night, it doesn't matter. Because when something wants to come through badly enough, it doesn't need you to unlock anything. It just needs you to be asleep, to be vulnerable, to be alone in a room that connects to a space where something wrong happened, where water damage and abandonment created the right kind of emptiness. The kind of emptiness that something else can move into, can pace through, can breathe through, can watch through night after night, learning your rhythms, waiting for its chance to cross over. I'll never stay in a hotel room with a connecting door again. And if you do, I suggest you check that the room on the other side is occupied, really occupied, not just listed as vacant, because empty rooms aren't always empty. Sometimes they're waiting.